Good morning. It is March 14th, Saturday morning, 9 a.m. It is the March 14th meeting of the Abington Finance Committee. We are meeting this morning with our school department, giving them a fresh, bright, early time to come in and let us know how they're doing and what's going on. We have Superintendent Peter Schaefer with us and Assistant Superintendent Felicia Moschella. Thank you both for coming. Very much appreciate your time on this Saturday morning and carving the time out during this extremely chaotic and busy time to come talk to us.
I want to start by thanking the chair, and I want to thank the committee members who are here and not here. Because even if you're not here, I know this is a lot of work for you guys. I know you didn't get paid for this. You're volunteers that go through all of these on behalf of the town and the residents, and I don't know how many people say thank you for that, so I just want to start by saying thank you. I know this is a lot of work. What I have for you today, I want to start at 3,000 feet and give you an overview, and then go as deep into every single number or every single question you have toward the end. Or in the middle. I mean, just stop me and say, I want to ask you a question about that, whatever, the pleasure of the board. The first thing I just want to pass out to you is our detailed budget packet. You should have already received a copy of this months ago. And I'm just going to highlight what's in it.
I didn't take with myself.
I'll stop anywhere you want me to stop, but the reason I want to highlight what's in it, and just give you that overview, is so that, as questions come up today, you can ask me, but if not, you've got a reference guide. In this packet, you have my budget message, which is an overview and describes this year's challenges and circumstances. After that, you've got a planning and development schedule. Then you've got a budget history that describes the budgets going back to 2010. You've got our enrollment data by grade. You've got our staffing. You've got our increase by major category page. You've got a breakdown of how the budget is appropriated page. You've got all of the positions. These are not, we don't anticipate getting all of these positions on page 8, but these are all of the requests. You have instructional material requests for 2 pages, and then you've got a line-by-line breakdown by function, by school. My staples got mine closed. I can undo that if we have to. But you can see it's a spreadsheet that captures all expenditures.
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Chris, welcome.
Chair of our school committee, Chris Coyle.
All right, thank you. Sorry I'm late.
No worries. We just started about 2 minutes ago.
You've got our articles, including the vocational transportation article. Those are students that go to the Norfolk Aggie School that we are required to transport those students. And then a substance abuse revolving account. Just so you know, that $8,000 amount isn't the amount of money received or expended. It's the amount allowed to be placed in the account. So, and the town has to approve that annually. So
It's essentially the cap on the account.
right. So
money will come in, money will go out, but it can't go above
right.
8,000.
Yeah, thank you. That better said.
Yeah. Took me a couple of years to figure that one out, so now that when it comes up, it's easy for me to explain.
And this is and that's our budget packet.
Thank you.
In terms of making a presentation to you today, I think what's most important is outlining, where a lot of our money's coming from. This year's different than other years because the state of Massachusetts passed the Student Opportunity Act, so that's brought a lot of money to us. And I just want to explain some detail about that if I could. So Felicia's got a presentation for you. And I'm not going to read the presentation, because that would be a terrible way for you to spend your Saturday morning.
I did After you forwarded it to me, I did forward it to the whole committee, so
Thank you.
everybody has seen this at some point in the last month or so.
Thank you. And
We definitely appreciate getting that and being
No.
able to see it ahead of time.
I appreciate that you took a look at it. I want to tell you that this updates that, though. I found a couple of errors in it, and I also trimmed it down. So this is the most current, and this is reflective of the situation right now. So the Chapter 70 aid package was incredibly supplemented this year for education by the legislature. I'll just do a brief history of Chapter 70. Back in 1993, the state passed the current educational funding, Chapter 70, and it's been providing money for education for all schools in the Commonwealth. The problem with the Chapter 70 formula, back in 1993, it was great, but then each year after that, it didn't grow with the rate of inflation in two areas in particular. So the two areas of inflation were the cost of healthcare, is skyrocketed, but then also there have been advances in medicine that have kept children alive who are coming to school, who we are providing educational service for, who never used to survive back in 1993. That's miraculous and appreciative of those benefits, and it costs more money to educate those children, and we're paying for that as a community. The equation never kept up with those. So the Chapter 70, the new Student Opportunity Act, is meant to make up for those differences. So if you go to the next page, you'll see the story in Abington. So that first grid you see is reflective of just under a 15% student population increase in the last 4 years. That's great news for us, because the more people in our community that are invested in the schools, the better for the community. They're better invested in our community, and it provides more income in terms of Chapter 70 for us. So the majority of these people are people that already lived in Abington, who are choosing to keep their children in Abington. We've also seen growth in new construction. You know that just by driving here today. We've seen growth there also. The majority is because we're keeping more kids from going to the privates or the vocational school than ever before. That has netted annually a savings of about $800,000 for the town, because the town has to pay the bill to South Shore Vocational or pay the bill to educate the kids in the town. I want kids to go to a vocational education if that's what they want to do. That's what's best for them. It's just a fact that it's cheaper to educate a child in Abington than the vocational school, because vocational educations are more expensive. There's more equipment, smaller numbers because of the nature of the education. We've also seen an increase of 28% in 4 years of our low-income students. Our English language learner population on the next slide has increased 271%. We were at just under 40 students back in FY16. We're now at 145, and we continue to see that number's grown since this has been published by about at least 10 kids. Special education students, a rise in the number of special education students.
Can I ask about the English learners? So is that a product of people hearing that we have a good program or something for that, and they move to the town to?
It might be. I think we do a good job.
Okay. I'm just curious what might be driving that.
I think it's also the construction you're seeing in town.
Okay.
And the other thing that happens is, even if you don't have new construction in town, you've got people who are seniors who have homes that want to stay in the community. They find they've raised their family, so they move out of that, and then another family moves in with kids. That's so even if you don't have new construction, you do have that effect occurring. And these are students that most of them we call them level 1. in terms of their ability to access the language, because they have no ability to speak English at all. So we've got to educate them on how to speak English, and at the same time, keep them up with, how to do math and English and science and social studies. So
So are those classes taught in their language? Is that how it works until they get the?
they're integrated
Yeah.
into with our students, and they're taught the language separately, and so we have to provide extra support to keep that moving. So it's a great question. Because that model's changed in Massachusetts over the years a couple of times.
You find that the kids are doing well, they're succeeding?
So another great question. I appreciate it. The longer they're with us, yes. One of the problems that we have is that we have a large Brazilian population, and their school year ends in the middle of our school year. So we'll get students
Oh, I got you.
right in the middle of a year, and we're trying to appropriately place them in the grade level, and where they're in between years,
Yeah.
and then they don't speak English. So
Peter, what do you mean by in between years?
they let's say they finish 7th grade in
December.
their country, and then they come to us in the middle of a school year. So is it 7th grade? Is it 8th grade? Where's the best place to place them? We found that chronologically is generally the best place to put them, because if they're further behind as kids get older, they're more mature, and it's not a good fit. And it's best to keep them
And
at
I
the
would
right
assume
age.
that for most kids, it's probably better to repeat half a year's worth of material than to skip half a year's worth of material.
Yes, and the problem is that they haven't covered the same material that we're covering at all, because their school system is completely
Vastly
different than ours. So Massachusetts schools are the best in the country, and if you rank us against other nations, we're about 5th in the world. So that's great. These kids are coming from, and it's not, from other countries that don't do what we do in Massachusetts. We're killing it, to be honest with you. The problem we're having is there are huge gaps. So it's and I'm going to get into that gap. That's what this money is for. It's those smaller groups, the low-income students, the English learner populations, they're behind the average achievement in the state. And that's what this money is for, to help catch those populations up. The next page about the Chapter 70 formula, I'm going to describe it this way. Basically, the state takes the number of students we have, and they give us a dollar amount based on the Department of Revenue's assessment of the wealth of this community. And then there are local tax dollars that you provide, that our taxpayers and the residents provide, and the blending of those two amounts of money, that's our budget. There's a minimum threshold for budgets in Massachusetts. That's the foundation. So just because I'm the superintendent of schools, of course I'm going to advocate for more money for education, but just to let you know, I'll let the numbers speak for themselves. That foundation number is way too low. That's back to that Chapter 70 formula that hasn't kept up with inflation. And again, of course, I'm going to say that I'm the superintendent of schools. To prove that, though, on the next slide, you'll see that the average community in Massachusetts spends 127% above that foundation number, because it just costs more money than that to educate children. In Abington, we spend, on average, 125% above that number. So the information I'm giving you, we're not out of whack. We're just below the average expenditure above that minimum threshold. Does that make sense? So not included in the foundation budget, transportation spending, capital expenses, food service, bonded debt service. And actually, the packet you have here, these line items do not include food service. That's a separate, it's a cash neutral business. So, the Student Opportunity Act.
Can I actually just
What's the definition of low income?
That'd be the federal definition by household.
Whatever it is.
I couldn't tell you the number exactly, but it's
I
low.
didn't know if that was.
Yeah, so like a family of
Yeah, the federal
5 has to make X
definition is
dollars,
very
it's
low.
that federal
Got it,
definition.
thanks.
Good question. So I've really already covered this in our conversation about the populations of students. The primary purpose of the Student Opportunity Act is to reduce the disparities among these student subgroups that I was describing. And it makes up for those inflations that I described from 1993. Because the Chapter 70 is supposed to be adequate and equal, and it's been neither. Every year it gets farther and farther from that for all communities. So the impact of the Student Opportunity Act in Abington, just specifically the dollars for us, it means an additional just over $1 million in funding for education for Abington. That's a combination of our population increase has driven that, and this new Opportunity Act that the legislature passed for education. Is the formula fair now? It's a lot more fair than it was. I'll let you know how fair it is as we go through this. So it is the new Chapter 70 formula for annually in Massachusetts for communities.
It's, right, it's not a one-time.
It's not a
funding.
one-time deal. It's the new way Chapter 70 is going to run. So,
Continual every year,
Right.
unless the legislature changes its mind.
Which is always-
But they have to vote to actually
Correct.
change it.
This is a commitment that the legislature has made.
so this last slide describes the positions that this money means for us. These are the proposed positions, likely not to change, but again, we're planning for next year in March, but these are likely to stay exactly the way they are here. English language learner teacher, and you know why, it's to provide that support that I described earlier.
What is that again?
English learner teacher to teach kids that don't speak English.
Oh, all right.
So if you go back, Greg, to page 2 in the presentation. Greg,
Oh, my bad, sorry.
thanks, Katie.
So we need to hire a special education teacher for the Woodsdale. We have students that, and we can get into the conversation on special education, we have students that we educate in the district that we want to keep in the district for 2 reasons. It's better for them, because if they can receive an education in our town and be with our kids and play on the same baseball teams, and that's a better experience for those children. Sometimes some of those students, though, are beyond what we can support in our buildings, and they need to go out of the district for more expensive placement, for more specialized services. So keeping them in the district is better for them, and it's more affordable for us, but we have to hire staff to create those programs so that we can keep them in the district. Those programs where we send kids out of the district range from the students that are in these types of programs would probably cost us
$50,000 plus transportation.
$60,000 a year to educate just that one child, plus the cost of transportation. So hiring this teacher, if we can put 5, 6 of those students, depending on their disability, together, is a more affordable way, and again, it's better for them. We have some special education placements, children with disabilities, that have never set foot in our buildings because their disabilities are so dramatic. They could be in a handicapping condition and be quadriplegic, paraplegic. I mean, it runs the entire variety of medical conditions that we all see in our society. They can cost us $325,000 a year to educate, and those numbers are in this budget. So, sorry, I got off track. So, a kindergarten teacher, a kindergarten paraprofessional. Without that, our numbers in kindergarten are going to go to mid to upper 20s. If you've ever been in a kindergarten class, or if you've ever had 25 kindergartners at your house,
as is mine.
Yeah, have 25 kindergartners over to your house, and then you'll get it.
I had 12 last weekend.
Yes.
It was enough.
Yeah. With how many supervising adults?
Actually, a lot of the parents stayed. So
Yeah.
so it was about 12.
Exactly.
So 2 grades after that will be at the same number in grade 2. And the importance here at the early grades, we saw that huge increase at the high school. And we have needs at the high school for more staff based on that. Our high school's a third bigger than it was 4 years ago. But these are kids learning how to read. And if we don't get them here,
Start them right.
we lose them for, the rest of their educational experience. Or we're fighting to get them back is the best way to say it, because that's what we do.
Actually, sorry, I keep going back to, we always talk about surrounding towns. What's the surrounding towns English learners?
Rockland, Abington are the 2 that come to mind that have seen the biggest increase. You get communities like East Bridgewater or West Bridgewater that don't see the same increase we have.
And that could have to do with Brazilian population locally?
Yeah, I have my own theory that when you get a faith community for a certain immigrant population,
Yep.
that the support that faith community provides brings more people up from that country, that population.
And very typically, when you see a larger population from that community, people who are of that community will gravitate towards that. To towns that have that.
I'm not a sociologist or an anthropologist or whatever the person is that studies these things. I have my own thought that it's really about the support, that group of people provide each other socially.
So is Portuguese the most common second language?
Yes.
Or first language?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Rockland has a brand-new school. We have a brand-new school, so, yeah.
And I think you'd see that historically in immigrant,
Yeah.
with immigrant populations, that they tend to, well, and my family came from Italy. My grandfather went to Revere because that's where people from his town in Italy were, and that's where
My Italian grandfather went, so.
So I think that's a very common immigrant migration
Yeah.
pattern.
Following grade 2, specialized tutor for reading. Those are students coming into our middle school that need additional reading supports. It actually will take one of our, to get probably to a level of detail that you may or may not want to know, that'll take one of our special education teachers out of that game and put them back in the game.
Back into.
In another capacity, supporting kids with educational plans. And then tutors are less expensive than teachers. The tutor will, but this is a trained tutor in a specific area of reading. That tutor will be able to assist those children that need that help. And then the last 2 are paraprofessionals. Again, supporting the high school. There's also a need for some paraprofessional help just to assist with the amount of communication, information, things that go on in the guidance and in the main office. With a third more students in the building, those offices are doing everything from trying to get kids into college to we've got kids, we keep a list of kids who are cutting themselves, threatening and attempting suicides, coming back from hospitalizations. And so in the life of that office and that guidance office, their attention goes to those things first, and we need, and they're doing so much of the other work around having a 1/3 increase in population at the high school. It'll help them focus more on those kids. And then the other correspondence is phone calls, message taking, just data that clerical that goes on in that office will be given to that person. So
what is a paraprofessional? I'm not familiar with that term.
a support staff member.
Okay.
Someone who helps in the classrooms. Again, we're able to take children with less critical needs, and they need additional support in the room. So it's a way to educate those children in a way that's better for them and it's more cost-effective, because if we had to create pull-out programs for them, let's say in math, you know, if we have a number of students in a room that are working on math, and we have 4 or 5 who struggle in math, if we pulled them out and created a separate class for those 4 or 5, it's not as good for them, and it takes more money. But if we can keep them in the regular class with the support of somebody else in the room, it's, again, better for them and more affordable for us.
Can I just ask a question more so personally vested?
Yeah.
So we just talked about the kindergarten classes, and then that you're gonna hire an additional grade 2 teacher to increase those sizes. What about first grade to address the 7 classes of
Yep.
25 right now?
Good question.
Is first grade able to accommodate those kindergartners moving up, or will it be second grade that it will level off?
We're able to shift people, so around within the district, to
Yeah.
create the number of sections we need for bubbles in the population.
Perfect.
So,
Perfect.
but,
Big concern.
no, but I'm glad you asked, because you raised in my mind another thing I should tell you. So what we're doing, one of the tricky parts about kindergarten is we don't have them in seats because they're really new to us. Some people come from private kindergartens. So we're constantly.
Private preschools, yeah.
Private preschools, I'm sorry. And
But
some
they stay
come
for
from
private
private.
kindergarten
Yep.
too,
Oh,
right?
for first grade, yeah.
Yes. So what we do is we really do our best at tracking
Sure.
those people that are in privates, so we can anticipate how many we should have. We also track how many people were born.
It's crazy. honestly.
You know, we go back 5 years to see how many births Abington can anticipate. And can I tell them your
Yeah.
joke? Or do you want to tell them?
No, you can tell. You can tell. I'll mess it up.
I
I said September 2026. Be ready for a kindergarten. Boom.
All right.
With everybody,
Everybody staying home. so.
That won't be in the minutes.
Yep.
I'm new, so how many of the, sort of the rise in the student population, didn't you expand kindergarten a couple years ago?
Yes.
So are they sort of uniformly proportioned across these categories? Or are they heavier in the low-income categories? Or, you know, how much of this growth is because of that?
Most of it is the birth rate of any given year.
Yeah.
And just like the other grades, we do see some increase in our student population just based on the amount of construction that's going on in town. I don't know that I'd be able to accurately, I'd rather tell you I can't answer exactly than make it up. I couldn't tell you how many of those kindergartners are low income or English learners off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and I could find it.
But it's not disproportionate?
No.
It's not like we, all of a sudden, because we expanded to pre-K, is that it, or?
Kindergarten.
Made kindergarten full day,
Yeah.
free full day instead of half day. So I don't know if we got a huge influx because of that. It was more the kids that were already here, now just able to go full day. So we hired, there were the same amount of classes as there was, there was no more half day. So I think 2 teachers were hired a couple of years ago to basically fill that.
Right, because before we were kind of like split, right?
Because instead of going to privates, where people are paying money, they come to the school department for their full-day experience. So it absolutely we did see that bump. But then, you know, that we did get increased Chapter 70 funding for those kids. And we do not anticipate we're going to have any more of those kinds of spikes. The spikes we're seeing are, in that population, are people that are moving in, not spikes. The growth is people moving in.
If you look at the first two, on page 2, again, I may be reading wrong, but it looks like between 14% of just the enrollment, and it's only some 28% as in a rise, and then the ESL, or English, whatever it is, English learners, would be 271. That would be a pretty,
Yep.
those wouldn't be on par with each other?
Well, I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Is that the question that you was asking? You were asking, are there any basically abnormal things?
Right,
That would
yeah,
be abnormal.
is it disproportionate? I see
This
the
is
growth
disproportionate.
in the top chart on page 2. And then I see the growth in the English learners, and it seems like English learners are growing faster.
I thought you meant by grade.
And
As a subgroup,
is
they
it
are.
in the lower grades? basically because of the pre-K or kindergarten.
So, yeah, so as a subgroup, that group is growing quickly,
Yeah,
but that's across all grades.
okay, all right, that's what I was.
Yeah, yeah.
So in the,
Sorry, can I just say though, our largest influx in population is really keeping kids in the district that would have gone someplace else. That's why we're seeing the large growth at the high school, because that's when they were leaving us. We don't have a bunch of high school kids moving in.
And private schools.
It's that they're choosing to stay in. They're
Yeah,
not leaving us.
Votex a bit when they're not going there as much, or to Spelman or whatever, yeah.
Right.
Great.
Justin, I apologize.
yeah, no problem. So in the Chapter 70 handout, there are 8 positions listed, and here we have 10.6. So are we just saying that 8 of those 10 are funded by the new Chapter 70 money?
We anticipate 8 additional positions altogether.
Got it.
Those were originally proposed, and we talked about them.
Okay, so some of these have come off since. this
Correct.
was
The
printed.
bottom
Okay.
ones have come off.
Okay.
You know, we're hopeful if things go right for us, we could add those things because we do need them.
Okay.
But as of now, this is what we're looking at.
And does the high school have a program for teaching financial literacy or personal finance or anything like that?
So we've implemented a couple of things. There is a business program, business class, and that's more finance and marketing in general rather than personal finance. But we also have Credit for Life. It's Rich Testa has helped from the business community provide that program. But we don't have, you know, what you used to have when I went to school. I'm so old, an accounting class. We don't do those anymore.
We don't.
No. The reason for that, which I'm guessing is your next good question. Is that your next question?
I was going to say why.
So I wish we did. We should still be teaching cursive. We should still be teaching typing. There's a bunch of things we should be teaching, but we keep stuffing more stuff in a 5-pound sack, and we are stuffing 20 pounds in now, and we've shifted to math, English, science, reading, technology, computer science, because that's what we need to do to create the most competitive kids to get the best jobs and go to the, you know, if they leave us and go straight to work or go to vocational, whatever they decide to do. We're just trying to stuff so much in their heads. We still have 180 days and the same number of hours in a day that we've had for a million years. I'm exaggerating because I don't know the exact number. That
There's
makes
also
sense.
great electives that are available to high school students that weren't available when we were in school, like entrepreneurship and, you know,
No,
other
As
type of
as
classes
Peter
that
just
are-
mentioned, computer science, which my son just finished up last term.
So our,
Computer scientist, I was happy to see him taking that personally, but
so, and
Is
you,
there an accounting elective? The reason I say it is because I will say the vast majority of people that are younger, that, you know, I come an interview or something like that, they are, I mean, they're terrible with money, right? So, I mean, there is no, yes, there are people who aren't, but the vast majority of them that are getting paid 50, 60, 70 grand, that's all gone.
yeah.
There is no, I have a couple bucks in the bank.
yeah.
And it's just, I think the accounting class somewhat teaches you that there are buckets at the end of the day and you should fill them.
I can't
I'm not
disagree.
blaming
No,
you for
yeah,
it, I'm
no.
saying taking accounting out of it, actually, I think, should, you know,
It's an important area.
yeah, I mean, it just gives people the understanding of how to actually maybe run a business in your own business, meaning you get a job and you're yourself a little business and you gotta put money away in case stuff happens.
I agree with you, and it would help. I think the biggest problem is we have a younger group that is into immediate gratification,
Yes.
because it's right there on your hand, and I mean, they know how to add and subtract, they're losing their money, but they don't get it that that's a big deal, because they got their handheld computers and you get everything you want like that. I mean, I can order us a pizza now and somebody on my phone, and somebody's gonna have it here in, 15 minutes, So it's just,
When you-
it's
No,
no, I get it.
unfortunate
You caught
society.
Chris's
I
attention.
get it.
Trillion onion.
I
don't
just
like to
think
share.
all those things make you feel a little,
And I don't disagree with you at all.
I think it actually helps.
Yep. We're just trying, and there's so many other things too.
Sure.
You know, the home ec class.
Life skills.
You know,
essentially.
the home ec class wasn't just so people knew how to like make pillows and make brownies. It was because everybody was going to work and kids needed to learn how to cook so they could feed themselves.
I mean, Peter, at the same time, the state what's
Yes.
required by the state limits the ability at times to branch out to those, because we have to make sure we meet all the
Right.
state
Yes.
requirements that are laid down for what to teach the kids.
And if you guys want to throw a position on here so we can run an accounting class, I'm
I
in.
go first in finance.
Can I object to that, Peter?
I mean, I'm in.
Sorry, Chris, what was that?
I would choose personal finance or the town.
Right.
Well, you can kind of
Same
teach both
difference.
together.
No, sure.
So is there a second, motion to add a personal finance and accounting class?
I'll second it.
So, I want to make sure I get your questions, or I'll, keep going. So, the next page I have for you, so we have to submit a plan to the state by April 1st. There may be a delay with the recent events. As of now, it's still due. And so this plan is, like you had, I think it's Russ or Justin said, it's these positions with other services that we're already providing in schools to address these needs. So this new money doesn't have to just be spent on new positions. It's meant for education, closing gaps, and also we're getting some more money because we have more kids, and it's going to be spent on that. So, major increase page.
This is different than what's in the past.
Okay.
This is updated.
And this is going to change over the next couple of months. The thing that can't change is once we get to a bottom line number, that won't change. But obviously, every day this changes based on the, we need a substitute. Special education transportation, somebody needs to change where they're going. So, one of the things that we have, that we're most sure about is the contractual obligations. There'll be some fluctuations in this account as we hire people or people retire. And the retirement offset for those people is not taken out of this yet. What's that going to be about?
Right now, it's 2 people, so
Right.
40,000. Typically, we take what they're making and then what a teacher, an average teacher would come in at on the salary schedule and take the difference and use that as a salary offset. But there's still some movement right now around who's retiring and who's not, and so we'll be taking that offset, but it won't be more than $40,000.
So just I want to be transparent about the fluctuations, so that, when you see changes, you're like, oh, that's what he was talking about. So this is, if you take all of our contracts and you project them forward, that are agreements that are in place, this is the number, $642,008 for all of the employees in the Avenue Public Schools. New positions, that's the amount as described in this packet with the positions that you saw.
Just to back up quickly to the retirements. One of the questions I've had and goes to comparative with other local area schools is when we do have someone retire and we're looking to fill that position or any position when someone leaves, are we typically looking for essentially a new teacher, or are we looking for a more experienced teacher, or somewhere in between?
It's a good question, because it also leads me to how do we budget for this number?
Right. Excuse me.
We budget for a master's step 5 because teachers are required to have a master's degree, and some teachers that we hire, let's say it's the area of special education, they're hard to find. Math teachers at the high school level are like unicorns. They don't exist.
Math teachers, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Math teachers where?
At the high school level,
unicorns?
They're hard to find. Yeah. They're like unicorns, yeah. Well, the reason is because with a math degree, our society provides multiple job opportunities for people. And with an English degree, people...
There are less.
There are fewer job opportunities for people with an English degree. So they become English teachers, and so there are fewer math teachers. So I'll put out an advertisement for an English teacher, and I'll get 700 applicants. I'll put an advertisement out for a math teacher, and I'll get 2 or 3.
That big of a difference?
Yeah. It's, science teachers too, they're hard to find. So it depends. That's why we use this average. So I'm gonna end up paying more for a math teacher than an English teacher, because the market sets the rate. So, when kids, grow up and they want to be teachers, they pretend they're third grade teachers with their stuffed animals. They don't pretend they're science teachers, they don't do chemistry classes. So elementary teachers are easier to find because more people want to be elementary teachers.
But just sort of to my question, I have friends who have taught in towns like Weymouth and other area towns that have then moved up to places like Norwell or Hingham or other towns in the area that are perhaps a little more desirable school departments.
So
school districts.
You've raised in my mind something I should point out. There are districts that pay more than we do. For the South Shore, for the communities that are in the North River Collaborative, and I'm going to miss some of them, but I'll tell you this. I'll tell you as many as I know off the top of my head. Rockland, Abington, Bridgewater, Raynham, Whitman, Hanson, East Bridgewater, West Bridgewater. Those are the Avon, Stoughton. Sorry, I think that's all of them, isn't it?
That's
good. So I base all of our salaries from my salary to everybody else in the district on the average wage in those districts.
Communities.
And I do that, well, it's the committee that I've been able over the years to convince that that's the right thing to do, fortunately. So far, so good, right? Yeah. Okay. The reason that's the benchmark is because that's what the market pays. That's how we get competitive people, but not blow away our salary account. Because if we pay people too much, I could have hired another teacher instead.
Right.
And if I pay people too little, I'm not getting the most competitive people in the market for your kids. And I've been through this in good times and bad times. In bad times, when I'm going to sleep at night saying, oh my gosh, how do we, we gave them too much money, what are we doing? I go back to sleep faster when I say to myself, we gave them what the market provides in our society for the job they do. And that's what free market does. That's what America does. Whether it's the person who's your plumber or whomever, you pay them the going rate.
And that's probably sufficient to keep people from moving. People know they can make more money, but what's the margin for people actually to decide to go to another district?
And that philosophy also settles contracts. Because when you get people that want an exorbitant pay raise and they want to go to arbitration with you, and you say you're getting what the market provides, they don't go because they're getting what the market provides. It settles the contract, both sides, from being, no matter how conservative or liberal, that benchmark, in my, there's still lots of room for disagreement on that. But it's Sun's side, Sun's killing me.
Yeah, it's a tough spot.
I'll tough it out. That benchmark is a fair, equitable way to I think, for a business to run. So, we're also going to see a decrease in our Title I funding. That's a federal grant. We know that decrease is coming, so we have to find the money because that pays for a reading teacher. And it pays for more than a reading teacher. It pays for that teacher and the additional supports that those students get in Title I reading. That total is just over $1 million at
Was the Title I grant that we had applied for, or was that something?
We apply for it annually, And it's because the federal government is pulling back on all of them. And they started pulling back on them 2 years ago, and we didn't see the pullback in Abington, and it's finally hit us. So it's already hit other places first, and it's hit us and other places in this year. So programs with other districts, that's our special education tuitions. So we have a number of students that we provide service for out of our district, and that we're responsible to pay for those placements. They're very, very challenging needs. And we also have to, and that's another line item, but we also have to transport them to those places. And those placement costs go from anywhere from, like I described, $50,000 to $325,000. We don't have too many. I think we have one. Or
We have one at 359 and one at 359,000, one at 326,000.
That's for 1 year?
correct. Wow. And other cities and towns have this exact same experience. I don't disagree that these, we are very lucky we live in a country that takes care of its population. I just disagree with the way this is funded. I don't think it should be on the backs of Massachusetts cities and towns, the way that it is. It is in Massachusetts.
So like roughly 300 each person? You saying that's the travel too, like the?
They're residents.
Yeah. No, I mean,
So for those kids, for those more expensive placements, those kids are residents. There's no travel.
I got you.
They live and wherever they are.
At the school.
Just for people that might be new, what does the 359 cover? Like roughly, like, because obviously there's more stuff in there than.
They're in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
365 days.
Yeah, 365 days a year.
Yeah.
So it's in order to educate them, it's keeping them alive.
Has anyone ever looked, so obviously they don't, do they come to the schools and stuff like that?
No, they live
They live
in a
at
hospital
the,
bed.
Okay.
at the
Or significantly
school
disabled in other ways.
facility that they're,
A facility. They
They've
live-
never come to the school, to the admin.
Got it.
So it may not be a hospital bed, but that's the type of environment that the most
And
expensive.
because they're in the district, Abington picks up whatever that is, if they live in another district, another revenue, right?
Because they have an
Yes.
Abington zip code.
Yep. Thank you.
And that's across the entire Commonwealth. And again, these are people that need these services. It's only the way it's funded in Massachusetts that I disagree with. So-
I mean, it's definitely a federal thing.
Yep.
Good.
It started as a federal thing, and then they didn't support it. That's individuals IDEA.
Disabilities Act.
Yep.
Disabilities in education.
So also in that is our students who go to the Norfolk Agricultural School. We've seen an uptick in the number of applications that we didn't necessarily anticipate, but it's in that number. So you'll see that fluctuate depending on how many of those students get into Norfolk Aggie. It's a great program. We want our students to get the kind of education that they want. It just costs us money when they go to that program. That's different and other than keeping a child in the district. The circuit breaker estimate, I'll describe what circuit breaker is to you. So there's a threshold that when we pay special education costs, if the threshold is about $48,000.
45 for next year.
It changes every year. For next year, it's $45,000. So for every dollar beyond $45,000 that we spend on a child who's out of the district, the state will reimburse us, Felicia is estimating on this sheet, at 70 cents on the dollar. So that's money that comes back to us to reimburse us in the following year for money we spend this year. And Felicia has estimated that at 70 cents on the dollar. So that brings money back in. But because we anticipate we're going to get $11,000 less in reimbursement that we got last year, that adds $11,000 to our budget on the major increase page, if that makes sense. Now that number also fluctuates depending on the state funding of circuit breaker. For an increase in that area of $613,544. Other school services, the major cost centers are transportation, special education transportation, 5-year curriculum and framework instructional plan, technology. We've zeroed that. That doesn't mean we're not ordering books and things. You saw that on the other page. And we have a NEASC visit. That's the New England Association of
Schools and colleges.
Schools and Colleges. In order to have our high school accredited, it costs us that amount of money for the accreditation process. We have to have a visiting team come in and they audit everything top to bottom, and then they give us a finding, things to work on, and then things that we should be, things that we should be proud of and things we need to work on. And that's coming next year for an increase of $48,314 for a total increase to the school department budget of $1,742,460. For a total preliminary budget of $25,563,598. I need that accounting class just to get to these, just to see this.
Can I ask a question about the salary?
Yes.
This is, and I asked this to all the departments, and I never get which one it's in, which one it's not in. Does this include the health benefits and the pension benefits? Is that here, or is that in the regular?
Great question. So pension benefits are paid for by the employees in the state, so this does not include pension. So all teachers and paraprofessionals put in their own dough for their pension system, plus the state adds money to that. So no, that's not an Abington cost center. The health insurance is not in this. That's carried in the town's budget and anticipated for, based on what you've heard today. And part of the SOA money in our plan is going to fund the health insurance for these additional positions.
And health insurance.
Not entirely.
Yeah, these are conversations we're having to close a relatively modest budget gap. Yeah, but some of that is already intended to help with the health insurance budget, so.
And the follow-up question is, it's only 2 retiring teachers, it really doesn't matter, but just in general, is a retiring teacher, is their health insurance necessarily higher or lower than lower because they're less likely to have a family, or higher because they're older than a new teacher? And their pension contribution, I know, would be higher.
I'm going to let Rick probably.
No, I think that's, and we discussed this the other day at our internal finance group meeting. You hit it right on the head. I think you're looking at, you're generally moving from family plans into individual plans to a great extent. Now, keep in mind that, those individual plans are going to become family plans probably within a couple of years. I think that would be typical of how it would work. I mean, we don't have crystal balls, but that's what we would expect. So probably in the first couple of years, you might gain some advantage from that. Longer term, probably not. And again, I'm not a sociologist either, but.
And there's no pension for the Teachers Association.
Yeah.
Teacher members that.
From the town.
From the town.
The town does not pay any pension to teachers or paraprofessionals.
It's all from there.
We do, because our tax dollars go to the
There you
state,
go.
and then the
Right.
state
But
pays
not from the
that,
town
but it's not from the
We've got a
town.
line item in
So-
the budget, though, for pension, right?
Correct. Yes, that's not for
That's
the
not
school.
for the school
School
department.
pension, yes.
School employees
So-
have their own pension systems with the state.
To the health insurance point, though, there's always, no matter what department the employees are retiring from, there's always a lot of gray area, because it could be an employee retiring who is not using the town's health insurance plan.
Yeah, no,
yeah.
Using
But to an earlier
partner's
question.
health insurance
to
plan
the-
or something of that nature, and you could bring in someone who is, and then you have a larger gap, or you're losing someone who had a family plan and
Yeah.
bringing in someone who's not taking the plan,
They turn 65 and they don't. It's a
Right.
different type of thing.
so.
But to piggybacking off an earlier question, I think to the extent that the school administration needs to attract more of a seasoned professional, particularly for your high school sciences and math, you may not recognize much of an advantage.
Yep.
So it really is, I don't think it's something significant, something significant that you can count on, so, yeah.
I'm an actuary, so I.
Who brought him?
I want to answer any other questions we have. That's what I want to provide you today.
You're not done, right?
No.
All right.
Whatever you want to know. Whatever.
Well, So my bigger question, obviously, with all this stuff that's going on, is most likely going to be a little bit of a pullback at some point, right? It's happening now. Immediately, there's going to be a lag from the government. They're going to collect less taxes. It's going to happen.
Greg means a recession.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. So, is there somewhat of a plan for that? Some of these things, even that you have settled up for 2000 this year, have to get pulled back or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, is there a blueprint to say, all right, if this happens, we know we can pull a couple levers? Huh? Whatever.
There's always
not this.
Definitely not this.
in any organization, there's moves you can make
Yeah, okay.
to batten down the hatches.
Yeah.
You know, though, that at the local municipal level, and I want to say this for towns, there isn't a lot to pull back on. There's some,
Yep.
because there's always some. There's a higher level of scrutiny. This is my own opinion. There's a higher level of scrutiny at the town level than the state has and the federal government has. The federal government, I'm sorry, it's my own opinion, the federal government does not have the same supervision that you have. They don't go through budgets like you guys are at the federal level with a group of citizens that I think pick things and look at them.
I said to
Or the state
Rick-
level. I just
Rick
don't think
the
it
other
happens.
night, the closer the government is to the people, the more accountable and effective
Yeah.
it is.
I don't think that the state of the federal government has this level of transparency. So,
Yeah,
I think there's more fat there, I guess is what I'm
It
saying.
sounds like there'll be a decent amount of money that's given to public sector. I just don't know, sorry, private sector. I just don't know how much is going to get funneled back into you guys. You know what I mean? So that's my only fear is that this stuff's going to trickle down 6 to 9 months, which is going to end up leading us into the end of this year, into 2021, which is right here. So that's my only sort of.
You have hit on the exact fear that we talk about all the time.
Yeah, no, I get it.
We depend on state and aid, which again is a trickle down, and
Yep.
some federal aid specifically. And we don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
So, the backup plan presumably would be spending under the levy limit by X percent every year to build up spending capacity. And, putting that money in the bank or whatever the case is, that becomes a philosophical issue. Does the community want to save money while it's not delivering services to plan for the future that may or may not come? So, there's no good answer to the question, but that's what we fear too. We know state aid during tough times, it's been reduced a couple times, but even if it's flat, it can't keep up with the inflation.
Right.
Not to get on my stump speech here, but you have, I'm sure Peter and Felicia could chime in on this too, but you have bodies of state laws and mandates. For instance, health insurance, a big one, and you have state limitations on your ability to raise revenue. So you have a disjoint
Right.
in the state and how the relationship between state and local government. That's existed for a long time, which has really, really squeezed local government, the entirety of local government. And until such time that that disjoint is corrected, this is going to be a problem. And quite frankly, I don't see that disjoint ending at any time soon, not in our lifetime. There's a lot of pressure, and especially when it comes to labor benefits. There's a lot of pressure, political pressure, that we can't generate in local government. And unfortunately, that is a big part of the disjoint. So again, limitations on how much revenue you can raise without an override. I mean, obviously, people can raise overrides, which are very difficult, as you know, politically, if not impossible, unless it's trash collection.
That's another word we shouldn't use, though. The override word or the recession word.
Right, sorry. And it's not gonna snow again either, just so. So I don't know if this, I think, did I explain that reasonably well? Yeah.
That's just my one fear, right? So 2021, right there, it looks like it's, if this ends in a little bit, then it's probably not the biggest thing, but if it doesn't,
We have the same fear.
And we all know that economies are cyclical.
Right.
And we go through ups, we go through downs, and the last down was a very, very major down. And it was a very difficult time for the town and for all of towns and states. And I remember going to town meeting and learning about taking 2/3 of a teaching position away and 3/5 of a teaching position away, and things that were done at that time to make ends meet, and
Just do it.
very difficult. So,
I'll say one other thing and just end it with that. It's kind of a controversial figure, but Steve Wynn, who actually did a couple of weeks, said the weird thing, but he invested a lot of, or whatever it was.
let's leave that aside.
But he invested a lot of money in downtimes, especially in 08 and 09, which helped him build his brand so much bigger, and pulled back while things were doing very good. It's sort of just knowing, and it's very difficult to figure out when they are, but when you get to a point, it's usually in 10 or so years, and it's there. So you sort of have to plan that something is going to change a little bit at some point.
Yep.
I obviously haven't been on the thing for that long, but if you don't make that sort of plan every 10-ish, 12-ish years, it can bite you. And if it doesn't bite you, then everybody has a little extra money. If it does bite you, then you're in a good position. You sort of have a plan. And that's my only fear with, not that I don't want to do everything, the new pickup truck for the police, things people really need or what they're saying they need.
One of the things talking about this is, we're not, in terms of level of service, we're not adding service.
Yeah.
We're keeping up with what we have with these positions. I mean, if you look at each one of those positions, it's keeping kids in the district, which is a cost benefit. It's investing that money to keep them in the district. And it's taking care of the growing populations we have so we can provide the same level of service. So we're not adding like extra stuff because we have extra money. I guess what I'm trying to say.
You're required to perform the services that you will be, no matter what, performing, whether or not you get these positions.
Right. And I agree with everything. At the same time, I agree with everything what you said about the clouds and performing.
And just to Russ's point, right, that's a very good point, because an overwhelming majority of what municipal government does is because we legally have to do it. And then there are things that hopefully, we want to do, and the amount of resources to do what we want to do is incredibly small. We want to do good stuff in our schools.
We've taken on, I don't know the total, again, it's a 15% increase in population. So this helps that.
The town has been growing, the school-age population has been growing.
Can I ask about the laptop replacement?
Yeah.
So is that student laptops, or is that?
Yes. So what we did was we went to the construction money.
So our one-to-one, we have a one-to-one program that all students, grade 7 through 12, have their laptops. I don't know if you knew that. That was part of the building project.
Okay. And so how many laptops is that replacing? 150,000?
We've removed that from our,
Oh, it's not in here at all anymore, okay.
no, the second page,
It's page 9, it's,
yeah, we gave a new one that has our current, yeah,
oh, it would have been in there.
yeah, because the building part.
So I'm really glad you asked.
So we were able to get it with funds from the building project, one more year out of
Okay.
Basically, that project provided that opportunity, so we took it.
Okay, cool.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Greg, you're right, I'm not done. I got more, thank you for
I'll let you go through capital first.
Capital plan. So this is a list of, this is the whole list. We do not anticipate that the town would be able to support all these items, nor do we think we should at this time. One that we want to put forward now, though, is increasing the security at the Beaverbrook and the Woodsdale schools. We have a camera array at the new building. We have the fob doors that are entry doors with the fob key. And we have a panic alarm system in those buildings. This money would provide that same level at the Beaverbrook and the Woodsdale for those two buildings. The painting of the Frollo, you know, we could, if we didn't have to, we could skip paint the Frollo. Problem with that is you've got a number of public buildings, and if you don't paint one here or there, you get a big bill at some point or another. And the paint on the exterior of the Frollo now is lead, and so it has to be done in a way that abates that lead. So that adds to that cost.
So there's no students in that building right now, right?
There's a special education program that we house there from North River Collaborative.
Okay.
But even though that paint is on the exterior, we are within the codes and everything for those students to be there the way it currently stands. The new roof at the Woodsdale, you know, I want to keep that on the town's radar. At some point, we'll be able to apply for a school building assistance with that, and the state will help us do that. I don't think that we should be applying for school building assistance right now. We just completed the school, and I think the residents are going to be paying for that, and they don't want to necessarily pay for a roof that will be okay for another year or two or three, hopefully 3, and then the parking lot replacement that we know is, you know, on the horizon at some point. These are really just so the town's aware of down the road.
Is there a long-term plan to expand capacity for students overall?
That's a great question. It's something I think about a lot. There is not at this point. So the plan is to wait and see. We do a demographic study every single year in terms of they take the number of new construction starts. There's no way of knowing how many of those starts actually bring kids, but there's a demographer does a study and provides us a growth factor in the town for the number of starts. They take the birth rate, they take the students we already have in place, and that study right now shows us continuing to slowly increase and then leveling off. If that's true, we'll be tight, but we'll be okay. If the town continues to grow at the current rate and that study is wrong over the next 1 or 2 years, then we're going to come up with a plan. If it goes down, you know, we also do need a plan.
When was that study done?
Just
January.
Yeah.
We do it every
we
year.
do it every year, just so we can stay on top of it. And like we know we have a large kindergarten class coming. Not a large. We have a really big class coming, not next year, but the following year. So adding this position now, if we can get, it's going to help with that. But I may be back here next year.
And then 6 years from now.
Asking for another.
And 6 years from now.
Just because there are a lot of kids born 6 years ago.
Justin, could you say your question again, just so I make sure I...
Just whether or not there was a long-term plan for expanding capacity for students.
Okay, thank you.
So we're constantly watching it, and there could be in the next year or two, because these demographic studies, the longer they sit on the shelf, the less value they have.
Right.
That's why we do it annually, and so we just want to, before we come back to the town and say we have to build an elementary school, we just want to be sure we got our ducks in a row, we got the numbers that require that. So we're not planning on building an elementary school out of
Yeah.
Just want to clarify.
Quick question on the enrollment data page. What is the SP column?
Those are students that are beyond the age of our high school population. As a result of their disabilities, though, they're still members of the high school population. Again, we save money by keeping them and educating them at our building, and it's a much better placement for them than sending them out of the district. It's a good question.
I have just a question about the general staffing, and I know that teachers and the education of the students is really important. Conversation throughout town, just that the high school, the cleanliness of the high school isn't kept up to the expectations of having a brand new building.
Yep.
Teachers are ordering their own brooms and mops so they can clean their own classrooms, which would be an expectation of a brand new high school. Granted, our winter was unusual and it was warm, and our schools were all on wetlands, but having in Beaverbrook at the high school, middle school especially, that there was an issue with mice where the mice were literally running through the classrooms while the children were having an educational experience. Do we need more custodial services? Do we need more outside? Was it just a unique winter that we all experienced? Why is the high school in a position that the teachers feel as though they're not in a clean atmosphere, that they're cleaning their own classrooms? So while hiring additional educators is also important, a clean environment for our students and our educators is also important too.
Thank you. We have honestly struggled a little bit with around the keeping up with the middle high school, and in the fall we actually initiated a new program. It's called Pro Cleaning, and it's a very scripted method of cleaning each space. So instead of a custodian coming in and doing kind of there, it's you walk in the room, you do this as you're walking the perimeter, then you do this on the inside, then you spray this and clean this glass. And my understanding, and from my observation and from my conversations, is that has improved the overall feeling within the building. In terms of the mice, it was very unusual. That is not 15 years. I've never experienced that. We hit it very hard over a short period of time, over February, prior to February vacation, over the weekends, and over February vacation. And since then, my understanding again is that there has been little to no activity. My understanding is no activity, but I don't want to say zero and then find out that there was something that I missed.
Right.
So we again asked the custodians to be super vigilant around any sitting food in the hallways. We asked teachers in classrooms not to have food because that's what attracts mice. Especially Beaverbrook and at the middle high school, to take away that food source for mice, we replaced a number of door sweeps that once we did it, started really looking into it, that there were some issues around the bottoms of doors that mice might be able to get in from there. So we're in a much better place right now.
Yeah, we had the same problem in Town Hall this year. We've never had it before.
Right,
We had to be-
and it's unusual.
And is it a building issue in town too? Is it upsetting?
The high school, it's wet, look down at your book, it's wet, so I understand that. I just think that, and I work in home care, you focus on patient care and that, but then you forget about what are the other pieces that make the whole day successful, and it starts down here for this part to be successful. So while it's important to have one more teacher and one more, it's also important to have one more custodian or one more broom or whatever your supplies are to make it a successful environment for learning.
I want to tell you, I think we still, on a daily basis, I want to say a couple things if I could. I think we still, on a daily basis, there are still some places that we need to improve in the middle high school in terms of cleanliness. Just being honest.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
And I know that Felicia's working on that with the custodial crew. I want to correct that without throwing additional staff at it,
Sure.
if at all possible.
Yeah.
I don't want to have a building that isn't
Right.
appropriately cleaned. That's first. The second thing is on the mice. There's also this piece where people with kids aren't always packing up food the way they should.
Well, you can't expect a kindergartner to
No.
not spill crumbs.
But I'm talking about the adults
Right.
too. I mean, we've got people with snack drawers that aren't always put away the way they should.
Right.
And then everybody says, "Oh, we have a mouse problem." Then people are like, "Oh yeah, I got to remember, I got to put that away.
Right.
I can't leave it out." In my house, the ants come every year because my kids put food all over the place, and then we're like, "Oh, you can't do that." Yeah, no, we can't. We're gonna have
Right.
mice. We're gonna have ants. So there's that piece too. And I'm not blaming the staff.
No.
Please, in Abington, I'm not blaming the staff for.
But that's why I just thought it was
Yep.
important.
No, thank you.
Where we focus on, and I've heard that, Felicia, you especially are doing a great job to work with the teachers at the middle school and high school and the custodial staff. So, but I do think that it's important that, it's all of the pieces of those who work at the schools to make it a successful environment for our children. And while the teachers are very important, so aren't the other facets of the day. So I think it's important to ask and focus on those.
No, I'm glad you asked. And in the building previous to this new building, we had a rampant problem a couple years ago
Yeah.
at the high school. And it was the lockers. Kids had food in their lockers and the mice were having a field day with it. And so it was like, okay, yeah, we as the adults, and again, I'm not blaming the teachers, we got to do a locker clean out day.
Yeah.
And then we got to hit the mice with, hard in terms of exterminating. And so it's our behaviors too, and exterminating that, oh yeah, we got to be careful about that. We got to wipe up.
Yeah. But just the general
Yep.
day-to-day outside, a nice problem, just to make sure that.
I think it's a work smarter, not harder, and that's what we're really trying to focus on.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the expectation can't be that there's 0 mice, because every building has the opportunity for mice, right? So, an unusual amount, you can address
Yeah,
that, but
right.
to say that 0 is the reach feels unfair to whoever's trying to maintain.
Look at the
building.
bright side, the kids can't go to Orlando right now, so.
We also have a theory.
I think it's just the outside of the ice, just the accountability to have that.
We also have a theory, and I'm not going to mention the name of the company. One of the companies that provides us pallets of stuff. Those are also 2 buildings where the pallets go directly in. They had a huge mouse problem. And you bring a pallet in, and you leave it there, and then, who knows, maybe it started there. We don't know. They also come indoors.
Yeah.
But we know we don't want them, and we got rid of them. And we'll continue to, because as you said, Joe, they're everywhere. It's a ongoing.
Yeah, every large building has the potential for mice. I mean, I've never seen one that doesn't, so. But, unusual activities is different, right? Something's pretty high, but I just don't want the expectation to be 0, and if we see 1, everyone's upset about it, because it's just.
There was a problem.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Can I ask what the custodians are paid?
They have their own separate agreement, they're their own association. Yep. And the number that you see in the annual report about individuals and what their salary is, they work so much overtime.
Yeah.
We've got custodians that work, every day but Easter and Christmas.
Okay.
But
I actually
average?
don't know. It's just like all of our other contracts, when we negotiate with the custodians, we're checking with neighboring communities around what the average rate is, and we pay an average rate for the area.
Okay.
And like Peter said, their salary can be significantly increased based on the overtime that it paid for Saturday and Sunday work when our buildings are open. It's how their base is the average. Their extra is based on the extra hours that they work.
And the majority of their overtime, so if you see that a custodian's making $120,000 a year,
Yeah.
or whatever it was a couple of years ago, we had a custodian at the high school that really worked every day except for, Christmas and Easter. And the youth groups that use the facilities, part of the facility cost, because we want it to be as cost neutral as possible, they pay for that overtime. Now, we'll have people stay for overtime to take on projects if there's something we need, like this last situation with the virus, we're cleaning everything up and down, there's gonna be overtime in there. But
Snow removal.
the majority of it is youth groups that pay that additional.
I think that's a good question, though. If you could see what they make, as opposed to how much overtime there is. I think we asked this a while ago for the police, so like at some point, we just get another person, not to stop the overtime, but to at least allow that guy to get more than 2 days off in the year.
So,
Even though he might like the money, I'm sure it'd probably be a lot cooler if he could have.
that's actually voluntary. The weekend work is voluntary, so
Yeah.
people, it starts with, there's a whole kind of construct of if the custodians within that building have the first opportunity to get the overtime, and then if none of them want it, then we go to the other full-timers, and then after that, we go to the part-timers. So there's, I would say, I can't think of an instance except when we're in significant flu season, or right now that anything's forced for overtime.
Yeah.
Or snow.
Or snow. It's absolutely voluntary. So, and those are being paid by the outside groups. So, and we do have part-time custodians that, substitute custodians, and they fill in for the overtime as well.
And so you're right to balance that. And we can email you the average
I
salary.
looked
We
through,
can
I
email you
don't
the
mean to
salary.
interrupt you, Peter, I looked through though, and, because I don't know off the top of my head, but like there's a line for custodians.
Yep.
It was about 420 grand for the year, and then in the staff, it said there was 9. So like math is like 45 to 50
I think
grand
they make about $50,000
on average.
a
Now,
year.
it could vary based on, I guess.
Out of the general fund.
Yeah.
Then their salary being paid by user groups inflates that. I mean, not really.
So the taxpayers aren't picking up that OT, the majority of the OT.
What is the user group thing? Sorry.
The youth groups.
Youth-
Like youth basketball.
Like youth sports, things that use the
So, and also-
facility when it's not school time.
As you factor in that OT, and I absolutely, it's a good question, but you also factoring in health insurance?
Yep.
So, I don't, well,
Yeah, it's not a forced overtime situation like it is in other towns.
I understand.
It's a voluntary.
When people do not voluntarily sign up, what is the procedure?
The head custodian is then responsible for the coverage. That happened. There are some custodians that part of what makes the job appealing to them is the ability to have the overtime on the weekends and supplement their income. And there's others who prefer to work Monday through Friday and not do the overtime, and it really balances. It seems to have balanced itself out.
Because my company, we support hospitals, so we have on-call for when we don't have staff. We always have staff in now, but when we have smaller staffs in the office, and we've changed over the last several years of going from strictly a voluntary, mandatory on-call rotation where people would sign up and would almost always take the days, to a different method where we have a sheet with multiple people and you go through and you only get compensation if you actually get a call and things like that. So those kind of things are changing in general. So
So we have 9 custodians between all of the buildings? The
And
reason
then
I'm asking
part-time.
It's full-time.
Okay. I'm asking these questions because when the Votech school came to talk to us, they have 10 custodians making $70,000 each at one building. I just thought it seemed odd considering the numbers we have between all of our buildings, but I don't know if it rings strangely to you, that number.
I mean, I don't want to speak for the VOTEC. It's a different kind of I can just say it's a different kind of organization.
Okay.
I think there's a different level of custodial work
That goes on there,
at a
probably.
vocational school, which may factor into that, but I don't know overall what the differences are.
Okay.
Had a couple of questions that I'm trying to remember what they were. Oh, yes. saw some of the materials, things that you had listed in the packet. One of the questions that I have, and given the current circumstances, it's, I think, fairly relevant. How much are we putting into traditional materials, and how much are we looking at digital and other differently accessible ways of educating our students?
So we've made the, I think we've had this discussion before, but it's a good question because it's one that we should have. Just the trend is moving to more digital for all of us. The textbook companies basically have the same price points for the digital and the physical. No, I was going to say the patent they have on it.
Yeah, it's the intellectual property that they're charging you for,
is
not
the
physical
same
materials.
for print and electronic. They figured that out.
Yeah.
So we are migrating more and more towards online and digital supports, which is really healthy for our kids for lots of reasons. I don't need to convince you that, you know, computers and technology is here to stay, but also it's more individualized for kids because the work that they can do provides more personal opportunity for them to go in different directions with the right safeguards online than the print collection. I mean, our kids are writing and they're being published nationally and internationally, the school newspaper. I mean, that's pretty cool. My English teacher in 6th grade used to read my papers and that was it. You know, now the whole world gets to read what these kids are writing, and that's a lot more exciting.
In the olden days, you would buy a textbook and you would want to replace it every 5-6 years. And if you could, you would. And if you were in a tough budget time, you wouldn't. And they would maybe last 10 years or more. And the textbook companies now, the intellectual property piece, they sell it as a license. So it lasts 6 years. So at the 7th year, if you want access to the online component, you have to buy a new license for it. So it is not an advantage to us anymore. They have figured out a way.
But it sounds like they're potentially offering more benefit online than that textbook provides.
Is there only one
Yes.
textbook company?
No.
No.
There's three big ones.
Do we ever,
Compete against each other?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
and so, do you ever keep track of like what they say this is worth day one compared to what we buy it at? I don't expect you to, because most people don't do that.
For the depreciation value?
No, like, hey, this book's $25, but I'm gonna sell it to Abington for 19.
So part of the problem is it's like buying a car or a truck. Like if you need a truck, you need a truck. If you want to buy a car, it's cheaper, but you don't need a car. So some of these programs are what we need, and every chance we get to comparison shop and get a better value, we do.
Yeah.
But sometimes, you know, we need to buy the truck because that's the
Yeah.
job required needs a truck. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
And there's absolutely negotiations with the sales
Oh, yeah,
people
yeah,
too, around what they're providing, what professional development they're providing, what free materials they're providing, what teacher materials they're providing, and sort of the whole package.
Is this like other things, but we're part of like a group, like a bunch of other towns buying stuff?
Every chance we get, we are, but not generally. And we push them for their prices in the competitive market.
It sounds like, Rick, that works well for other things, right?
Yes, very
Like,
well.
Very well?
Yes.
I don't know if it's possible to get involved with Rockland and Hanover and whatever. I mean,
North River, perhaps.
Yeah, so
Or even just invite somebody else on the phone call that do a little bit.
we do that.
Greg offers to every department that comes in because he's very good at negotiating.
Whether or not I'm good at it, I don't know, but
He's a
I
jerk.
do it every day. So,
I bet you're pretty good at it.
but-
And I don't think you're a jerk either.
We're in a buying collaborative, you know, food service products.
Yeah.
Food service programs in the South Shore have gotten together. A milk bid for one district versus a milk bid for 10 districts. The volume
Yep.
is much better. We're in a buying collaborative for custodial and maintenance supplies. Again, South Shore communities got together and said, hey, if we all buy the same toilet paper, paper towels, brand of floor cleaner, then we can get a better price, and we absolutely have. School supplies, we're in a buying collaborative for school supplies. So in the areas that are, we competitively procure. Textbooks are a little bit different around procurement, but when we procure a textbook for a textbook company, we're also reaching out to other districts. Who's using it? What are you getting? What are you getting for pricing? What are we getting for pricing? Oh, we also do it for our transportation. Our school buses, we have a collaborative bid with Whitman Hanson, because Abington as a community isn't as attractive for a transportation company because we're a smaller town. So a number of years ago, we went out with Whitman Hanson, who runs a lot more buses than we do. So as a joint venture, we're much more attractive for a company to be able to set up, dispatch center, a garage, and so that's been very successful for us as well.
And the only reason that I say it is because if you look at, say, and I don't read too many books, but like Merriam-Webster, right? They didn't have little pods all over their office where people could work up in a loft and work from home and do all these great things. But these companies, like a Salesforce, everybody gets to have a cool break and this lunch every day. And the reason that is because the books cost money to send out and print and the software doesn't. So, and that's why if they're keeping the price at that one specific level, they do probably make a good chunk of change. My only point is if we can get into a collaborative because I think the books is a pretty big chunk of change, right?
Everything,
but
we can save a nickel on,
Yeah. So if it's possible, I don't know if anybody's ever looked at it. I'm assuming somebody has. But if we can get it, I'm assuming that would probably help your bottom line, and maybe you can get another teacher instead of
help another community.
whatever. Yeah. Again, I don't know if it's even possible. If it is, great.
And to the extent that we can,
And you can always call me. I swear to God, I would literally will say, I am Bob at
Can I just publicly say too that I think he's a good guy, I worked on other and we've had, conversations outside of the committee, so.
There's many people on the other side of the phone that don't have that.
Greg asked very good questions.
But Greg, that is a very good thing for your business.
Yeah,
That people think that way of you.
You learn different things to survive, and a lot of people also don't like to do that. I really do. You know what I mean? It's horrifying. How many times have you gone into a sub shop and it's $8 and been like, I'll do 7. Sometimes just because at the end of the day, who picked that $8? You have to think of it like it's an arbitrary number, it's not. So if it's just myself, with my family, I don't do it. But if it's with me, just myself.
Do you negotiate at McDonald's?
You can.
I don't do it at
The best
McDonald's,
part about Greg is though is that
my
we
wife
have the
does get
same
mad
address,
before.
so he gets his pool opened every year, and they come to my house first.
I just negotiate for the bill to go.
So then we
on.
both get it free.
Because you clean yours, that's why. Greg won't spend the money, yeah.
But yeah, sorry, I don't mean to sidetrack anything, but it does sound like what Rick said for a long time. There's much stuff that you can have in that collaborative or whatever. It helps.
I have a question probably for Rick. These 8 new positions, they're currently in the current
Yes.
version of the budget that we expect to have the deficit closed within the next 2 or 3 weeks or whatever?
Yeah, I thought it was 7.5, but that's okay. Yes, they are.
Okay.
And at the moment, we have about a $300,000 deficit, which is more real. It's not the paper deficit that we had before. In fact, we sat around this week figuring out what we couldn't do. Next week, we're going to figure out what we can do. We do have some opportunities at, tightening our grip on our fixed costs a little bit more, looking at some other relatively minor revenue opportunities. But, it's legit, but, I think we're almost at the point where we're trimming around the edges. So, yeah, we're definitely, I will say, though, that when we saw the initial cherry sheet before we had the presentation from Peter and Felicia, boy, were we excited. But understanding, the purpose of the funds was a little sobering, so one of the things, too, I'll bring up, Chris asked a very good question about health insurance. And one of the ways we're able to put a large chunk of money towards that is shifting the VOTEC. I know it's more of a shell game on paper, but the savings from the VOTEC is a helpful piece in closing that health insurance gap. So it's part of our march towards, closing this gap. But it's a legit $300,000 gap, and we've all been through worse before, and, we'll figure this out with minimal damage. Is that safe to say?
We have no choice.
Yeah, that's very safe to say.
So along those lines, one of the things we've talked about in past years, and this is more for Rick, but really for all of you, is when you take away sort of the fixed costs, the health insurance, those types of things, the percentage between the school budget and rest of the town budget, where we at
That
this
equation
time?
in cities and towns is gonna get blown away because
Yeah.
there's so much more money coming in for education now than ever
Yeah.
before.
And we don't have that percentage, I don't have that in front of me. I will say that when you take away the fixed costs, right now, the increase, the school budget without the additional Chapter 78, I think is about a 3% increase.
3%, correct.
The non-school part of the budget is up about 2.5% overall. So, the equation's gonna be the additional $1 million, there's no question about that. I don't have that figure in front of me, though.
And I believe, how many millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars did the state put into education this year, additional? You're gonna, Felicia's gonna hit me in
If
the
we're
parking lot
getting,
for asking.
if we're getting approximately 1 million, or 351.
Well, I wanted to say it was over 300
cities and
million.
towns, I'm guessing we're not
The highest.
the highest
Increase aid to
on that,
locals.
so.
It increases local schools, aid to local schools by $1.5 billion.
1.5, I was way off. So that equation in communities
Yeah.
is gonna be off.
What other questions do people have? Anything on the very large breakdown that anyone has? I know some people have been working through that.
Talking about the warrant articles?
The ones at the back of the packet.
The article requests.
I have to take that back. That's how much is in Chapter 70. That's not how much the increase is.
I think I was right.
Without any changes, the aid would increase 104 million. With the aid changes, 200 million as a result of the SOE changes.
Actually,
Across the state. So Chapter 70 was increased by 303 million, which is the largest increase in aid going back since FY19.
So it's only off by 3 million,
Yeah.
instead of about 300.
1%, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
good. I'm
Sorry,
realizing we
I
already
just wanted-
talked about this.
I put a number up there, I want to make sure it's the
Yep.
right.
And then we get a portion of that.
So Matt, we already talked about
1.5
this.
million.
Actually, I did have a question on that, well, since you did bring it up. The out-of-school transportation, the $14,000.
You're gonna love this answer, because the consortium collected.
So I work, we have 2 buses that go from the South Shore to Norfolk Agricultural School in Walpole. And there are about 8 communities on the South Shore. We share the cost of the buses. We have about 8 different pickup locations, and that is our portion of the cost of those buses. If a bus costs $50,000 a year, we're saving.
So my question was, I think every year that I have been on the committee,
Yep.
it's been $14,000. That continues to be the actual cost?
It has gone, well, one year we added a community, one year we took away. We actually don't know the exact number of communities. Whatever's left in that article goes back to the town at the end of the year.
Okay.
So I think that's been the number for probably 4 years, is that?
Every year that I remember seeing a number for that, it was $14,000, so most of the numbers we see change,
Yep.
so figured we should
Nope, that's a good
at
question.
least check on that.
Yep. That's the most we would spend on that.
One of the questions that I had asked you, I just want to kind of put on email, we had talked a little bit about the enrollment rate at South Shore VOTEC and how we had seen since announcing that we were opening the new school, we had seen a consistent drop in the enrollment at South Shore VOTEC of Abington students. This current year, the number of freshmen there is greater than the number was, and it's the first time the number of freshmen had increased since we started seeing that. So we had talked a little bit about whether or not we're seeing a leveling off of that, or if there'll be a bounce back up now that the new school is not
As
Not
new.
new.
not as new and shiny.
It's a very good question. What we anticipate seeing is a leveling off, and there'll be minor fluctuations from class to class, because even if the one class is larger than the next class or smaller, there'll be a slight fluctuation. And even within that, there'll be a fluctuation. We don't anticipate after this coming year, so next year, the Abington High School is going to get another 40 students than they currently have, just because we're graduating a smaller.
Is very large.
We're graduating a smaller senior class, and we're taking in a larger freshman class. So now we're 4 years into this, and so each of the smaller classes after next year, will have left. So we'll stop seeing these major increases, and it'll find its a consistent benchmark, probably about where it is. Unless South Shore, builds a shiny new school or something, something could change that.
Seems like the high school grade average becomes more along the lines of 160, where it was 120 or whatever
Right.
before the new school was built.
In the tough times that we had in the last recession, we saw, it was a downward spiral, because we were on warning with our accreditation at the high school, so we saw people leaving us because we had to cut programs back so much. And so that hurt us more. We got less funding because we lost students to the VOC. So things like that will, God forbid that happens, we get in a tough spot with our programs. Some incident makes that change, but generally, this trend is what we would expect to see.
Anyone have anything else? I will say Peter and Felicia have been very responsive to any questions that we do send them, so if you do have stuff that comes up between now and the end of our budgeting process, let Justin or myself know, and we've been communicating pretty regularly with them. They've been really good about
We're in every day,
getting back to us.
through this situation we're in. We're not in quarantine, we're in a situation where we want to limit the spread in the community. So we're working, and
Does anyone have it there in school or anything like that, that we just made a proactive decision?
as of yesterday, Marty Golightly stood about 2 feet from where you are and said there were no identified cases in Plymouth County. But we know they're there.
Yeah, sure.
Plymouth County just doesn't know where they are,
Yeah.
which is
Identified
why
is the
we're
key
all
word.
doing this. So, no, we don't have any identified cases that I know of,
Yep.
but
What is the impact financially to the district?
so it's
what we're doing
I'm
right
glad
now?
you're asking, because our last day of school will be, so the impact would be on, obviously, wages and salaries and things like that. That'd be the major piece. There are other impacts on cleaning materials, supplies, and the custodial OT. There will be some impact there. The wages and if we had to replicate services into the summer and extra buses and things like that to make up for things, that would have a major impact that we will not have to shoulder. We're still going to have the April vacation period. School will now close on June 19th because we have to make up the total of the 5 snow days that we have in our calendar. And the state commissioner has provided, through the legislature somehow, I don't know how, but we have permission in Massachusetts to just do our snow days, and that's it.
Go to the date of the snow day.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, the first winter, we don't have a lot of snow days.
Yes.
I thought we were out of the woods on
Thinking
that.
we're gonna end on June 12th.
There's not a requirement to do 180 days in the school anymore, which if you've seen Everett and Boston, good thing there's not a requirement.
Yeah.
They're out till April 27th already.
So that was actually going to be my next question is, what's our evaluation point, like time points of,
Yeah.
we're at 2 weeks right now.
Right.
When do you make the decision for?
We evaluate it every day, and
So-
we don't know. We'll see. I
Yeah.
think it's, obviously, I feel a little self-conscious saying this with your expertise in the room, and I know that you, it's based on the exponential and the trajectory nature of this disease.
Until we're testing more people and we know what the denominator is.
Right.
And Matt, I want to say this, I think, and I'm going to speak, you can stop me if I'm incorrect, but based on our conversations, you worked with other superintendents
Yeah.
in the area to kind of be universal, so
Yeah.
I'd imagine that would continue throughout
We have
the
weekly
process.
conference calls
Yeah.
scheduled with South Shore superintendents. We have weekly conference calls scheduled with the commissioner. Those could become more frequent depending on, as information comes out.
Poor Marty, I haven't called him today, but I've talked to him 6 or 7 times every other day.
I think
We talked to him Wednesday, so
I think it's also,
the timing for both him and you was fortuitous
we
for
absolutely
us.
understand the impact this has on the community and the families of Abington. And we're gonna, we've sent out information regarding some voluntary online learning if families want to take advantage of that.
My children do not want to take
Yeah.
advantage. They will be taking
Yeah.
advantage of that, but they don't want to.
Hopefully by everyone's efforts, that we can slow this down.
So basically, it wasn't going to do any good if 1 or 2 communities did this and 1 or 2 didn't.
Right.
And so we all got together and said, let's do it, because we were getting no direction or real leadership from other people. And I don't know, we can debate whether they should give us or not. We just decided we have to have that leadership here. So we did it all together. And even if you stayed open with one person closed and one person open, one person closed, not only does that not work for a society, but you can't even stay open because half your employees have kids in another
Exactly.
community and
Give
they're not
yesterday's
coming in.
example. Give yesterday's example.
The districts that were open yesterday struggled, and they had huge numbers of staff that were out, so they couldn't even get through their school day, even though they were open, because their towns were in a similar
And
situation.
that's been my question on the whole thing is, if you're in a community that's closed, but you live in a community that's open and your children, or the other way, you live in a community that's closed and your children are not going to school and they're young.
Yeah.
And you don't want to send
I
them.
mean, I didn't follow all the
and-
closures.
And
but-
you work in a place that's open, what exactly are you supposed to be doing?
I didn't follow all the closures, but I know, generally speaking, most of our teachers probably live, if not in Abington, within the South Shore would cover a greater aspect of it, so it would kind of cover almost all of that.
Yes, and we don't have a lot of teachers commuting from Connecticut. or-
Right.
In my own, this is only my crystal ball, I think if you're in a school system in Massachusetts and you haven't closed yet, you will be closed by Sunday. Everybody's going to be closed.
I would imagine.
Well, again, it's
And
And
it's almost like shame on you if you don't.
every
Right.
level, political and otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
This just got,
Well, no, because you're self-isolating, self-distancing.
this just got
They
real.
can't wrestle. I know.
babysit from 6 feet away.
Yeah, yeah.
Other questions, comments?
I-
Thank you
I
very much
really-
for your
I know
time.
it's
We appreciate
Saturday.
you coming out here on a Saturday, and especially with all that you have going on.
I sincerely, I told Rick yesterday, this is my one opportunity to really go through this with you guys. Not that you won't call me and I'm here, but I appreciate that you would listen to us and go through this with us. Thank you to everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
Rick, have anything new for us since Wednesday?
Just a brief recap on where we stand in terms of closing our budget gap. That's really it at the moment.
I told you I'd come.
And you did?
Hopefully this week, we will have a plan or proposal to balance the budget.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, Chris.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, we do not have correspondence. Are there any liaison reports? We do not have meeting minutes notes from Wednesday to go over just yet. Without that, our next meeting is next Wednesday. As of right now, the plan is for it to be here, but we will be talking with Rick and other town officials to see what the right move is and what our options are for that. But as of right now, the plan is to be here in the room on Wednesday, and I will be in communication with you to let you know if that changes. So we do have the fire department and the community preservation committee scheduled to meet with us then. Any other comments, questions, motions?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Motion to adjourn in a second. Any discussion? Without any, all those in favor of adjourning?